holy crap, we're 4 days out from the election. How is everybody feeling? Does anybody want to come up and have a little bit of conversation around that? I know I'm having a lot of anxiety, to tell you the truth. I'm often thinking about the fact, like, the elections in the United States. And I want to have this like confidence booster here, but I am so nervous. I gotta tell you. Hello.
Hi there, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. I'm a bit of a noob at this, and I don't know if I actually know how to turn my camera on. Oh, there we are. Okay, great. Uh,
You're
no, maybe
doing
it didn't
pretty
work.
good.
Well, I've got one of two things happening. Hold on. There we are. Hey, hi.
Hey, look at you. You have an amazing smile. Like
Oh,
your
thank you.
smile was made for the camera.
That's so kind of you to
You're
say.
very
Thank
friendly.
you. So, you feeling anxious about the election?
I am. I'm really feeling, I feel like, you can get so confident, but didn't we do that with Camilla? We were like
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the States, and now so I'm like in this space of like, I think I know where it's gonna go. I have confidence in where it's gonna go. But there's this part of me that's like, don't get too excited. Be
Hmm.
reasonable.
And so what outcome do you fear?
I fear that the conservatives will get in. Like, I know everything is saying the other way, but just to me, it's just a big fear. I think about, it's like when Pierre Polyev released his platform the day before yesterday, and then the next morning he came back and he was like, "Wait a minute, I forgot something. I'm removing wokeness from the government." Like, how much?
The woke ideology narrative agenda. Yeah, I mean, I share your fears about a conservative government, of course, and I think the previous one was disastrous on a number of fronts. And the sort of like and like they had the opportunity to take that out. Like they issued the platform, like as you said, without using woke as a pejorative, and then made sure to include it. So I do feel like that kind of like I've definitely heard it suggested that that means they're flailing, that they are really struggling. And one thing I will say about the comparison to Kamala Harris is that Kamala Harris's internal polling never showed her winning.
True, true, true.
Whereas like the polling does seem, I think the
Our
most likely
hearts
outcome
were
is
in it for her.
yeah, I think the most likely outcome is a liberal minority, which you might recognize as exactly the situation we just left. Which I think that's for all the chaos and all the upheaval. I think that the net change, at least in terms of who is governing the country, will probably be pretty simple. Not much of a change at all. I don't think. I think the big losers right now are the NDP. Um, I think they. So I was. So full disclosure, I'm a former New Democrat. I was very involved in the NDP for about the last 7 years. I left during the. I'm Nova Scotian, and I left during the provincial election in the fall of last year.
I needed
Uh,
you here tonight to have this conversation, actually. I should have
it was
sent
meant to
you an
be.
invite because what has happened to the NDP? Like, I am gutted. Like, if you had been talking to me in November, December, I had every intention of voting for the NDP, but there's this face I don't recognize with them anymore. And I've had these engagements with them like who are these people?
Yeah, to me, like I've become quite jaded about the party. Like I've left, so now I have all kinds of unkind things to say about them, of course. But ultimately, I think the problem is that our political parties, the Tories and the Liberals, or whatever you call the CPC, and increasingly the NDP, I think post Jack Layton, have become, they called what happened after Layton and during Layton the professionalization of the NDP. And so this led to like a more polished sort of like electoralism, a more polished team. But ultimately, I think that they have adopted the ways and means of the other parties. in my view. And in doing so, have made themselves less distinguished from the other parties. And of course, the supply and confidence agreement did little to help that. And I think that even though the polling numbers for the NDP are more or less static or appear static over the last 4 years until the last month or so when they went in the toilet, I think what we were seeing over that time, based on my observations of the posture of the party and the messaging, that the party was courting swing Liberal voters who were disaffected with the state of the Liberal Party and upset with Justin Trudeau or upset with the current state of things and looking for some sort of progressive alternative. So I think that they were able to temporarily win some Liberal swing voters. But in doing so, they abandoned many of their values and core principles and alienated a lot of leftists. And so for every, swing Liberal voter that came in the front door, a leftist went out the back. And so when the Liberals became ascendant again, even though those numbers look the same 20% 4 years ago as it was at the writ drop, the composition of the party, I think, changed such that many of those people were, again, like disaffected Liberals. They could see the writing on the wall. The polling was terrible, that Trudeau was enormously unpopular. And so they went to the NDP. But as soon as the Liberals righted the ship and dealt with the two immediate problems of Justin Trudeau and the carbon tax, they all went back to the real thing, as opposed to the sort of facsimile that the NDP was offering. And now we see the gap opening up. Now we see the massive hole where all those leftists used to be in the party. And now we see them polling at 8%, lower than they have in 4 years. And so I think it's the catastrophic failure of a major gambit on the part of the NDP to try and have like this big tent party and to try and eat into some of the Liberal vote share. So, but yeah, they just do things the same way. Like it's crazy to me to watch Jagmeet Singh doing this like tough guy thing with like he's got a heavy bag and he's boxing it in a photo op, and it's just like this is. I find it kind of unseemly. It just makes me think of like shirtless Vladimir Putin on horseback. You know what I mean? Like this is macho thing that like it doesn't like. And I understand that Jagmeet being a BJJ practitioner comes by it honestly, but regardless, I don't personally feel like that resonates with me, like that kind of like tough guy stuff. Like, and Justin Trudeau's done the same thing when he fought Patrick Brazo in like a celebrity boxing match. It's like, okay, guys, like I don't enough, bread and circuses. You know what I mean? So that's what I think has happened to the NDP. They are doing business the way the other parties have, but they aren't the other parties. So all those Liberal swing voters they courted have now gone back to the real thing.
And I'd like to preface this by letting you know, first of all, welcome to Beaver Politics at 616. And we appreciate you all. We're here with Through Disclosure. And this is my sidekick, Frontline Feminist. So thanks for joining us, Frontline. And we're here to talk about truth through disclosure and politics. So I'm going to kind of let it flow loosely tonight because I think we all have a lot of big feelings that are happening right now. For me, I was ready to vote NDP. I'm a swing voter. So my allegiance is never to one party all the time. I don't believe in football politics. You know what I mean? I'm going to pay attention to all the parties and I'm going to look at what's best for Canada in the moment because it's so ever changing, right? And that's when I'm going to decide to vote. But I just kept waiting for Jagmeet to show up and meet the moment. And I was like, where are you? Now, to be fair, I do support strategic voting. I am not telling one person to walk away from strategic voting. I think it's very important. I love what JB Politics is doing. And if we want an ABC vote within Canada, I think we need to keep focused on that piece.
It's true. I think there is some legitimate criticisms of the way those numbers are derived.
Okay, sure.
In terms of like the bar graphs that they're showing us about what they forecast as being the outcome for individual ridings. Because the polling isn't really done riding by riding. What they're doing is they're taking the national polling and extrapolating what they think the result will be, partially based on what the previous result was. And so I think there's not as much certainty in those individual numbers as there is of the national numbers as a whole. And the national numbers aren't always a good portender of seat count either. Like you probably remember that, like the Conservatives actually won the
Yeah.
popular vote in the last election, and I think the
Yeah.
one before that too, but
Mm-hmm.
didn't come out ahead seat wise. And so like there's quite a bit of variability there. So and it does sort of privilege the larger parties in most cases. Like an ABC vote privileges the Liberals in most cases. So I understand people have their kind of resistance to it, and like for myself, I'm a Green Party supporter because I got frustrated with the NDP for reasons specific to one particular cause that sort of affected me directly in terms of like the people I know who were kind of like shoved to the side by the party. And I know they have a long history of not really meeting the moment, as you said, on this issue. And so I noted that the Green Party was willing to run some of these folks when the NDP wouldn't. And so when I got fed up with the NDP and I was determined to remain involved in electoral politics, I got involved with the Green Party. But I do think that, and I've got a whole TikTok video about it, but I do think that you are smart to be a swing voter. I think that people who engage in what you referred to accurately as football politics are ceding all of their electoral power. If you're never in a good position to negotiate if you're not willing to walk away.
Yeah.
And that was the decision I had to come to after 7 long years invested with the party. Is like I had to walk away. There's no point. I can't just continue to support this. They made my position untenable, basically, with some of their actions here in Nova Scotia at the provincial level, and I had already checked out of the federal party. So, but yeah, I absolutely agree that political disloyalty is a sensible quality in a person.
Oh, yeah. Thanks. I appreciate that. It's a hard road in a time like this, right? Because we want to wear our colors. And, for me, I'm very honest and I'll be supporting Mark Carney all the way right now. But my vote would have went NDP otherwise if we weren't in the state of the affairs. And that's why I find it hard to even look at polls right now in a way, because we're in a time like no other. So predictability is even really hard to gauge right now.
Absolutely.
Frontline, how you doing? Any thoughts?
I'm doing good. You guys already know I'm pretty much Oh, there we go. Now you can hear me, right?
Yeah, we gotcha.
Okay, cool. Sorry, my mic was off there for a second. I forgot that there's 2 different mics I have to deal with. Look, I'll be brutally honest. Some of the politicians that I like the most are not politicians that I can vote for. Like, for example, if we look at Charlie Angus and the NDP, I would have loved for him to run the NDP, right? I think he's absolutely brilliant, and I think that he would have been a lot closer to what the old NDP stood for. And it's sad to see. It's really sad to see what happened, and it's sad to see the approach that they've taken, everything that happened with Jessica, everything that happened with them going after JB and even like putting his name out there, and like it's just that should never be coming from the NDP party. So I was really disappointed in that. I always forget his name, and I'm sorry that I forgot his name right now. I was going to look it up before I talked, but the new Green Party, guy that Elizabeth May just brought on. What is his name? Help me out.
His name is Jonathan Pedno.
Jonathan,
and I thought it was
right.
a real shame that they excluded him from the debate. I think he would have given Carney a run for his money. He's a francophone.
He is brilliant. I love that man. Like, I love that man. And I wish that like I could vote for Green and not throw my vote away. But we are where we are. This is an important election. It's an important time in Canadian history. And if we're going to be that's the thing. I like to live in reality. I like to be brutally honest. And brutally honest, we have 2 choices right now. We're either going to go down the same path as the United States with the Conservatives, or we're going to go with the Liberals and not go down that path. Are the Liberals still a little bit too pro-capitalistic for me? Yes, but whatever. I'm going to put that aside because I'd rather have my rights than, be completely financially intertwined with the states and potentially see some of the horrendous things that they're going to continue to do and be brought up here to Canada. The Conservative plan only benefits the ultra wealthy, and it is tailored and written in a way that makes average Canadians feel like they're going to be helped. But when they actually dig into it and understand the details, it doesn't benefit anybody but the people that are already really well off. And the rest of us are going to suffer even more. So at least with the Liberals, we won't have that much of a suffering, and we'll still feel like, okay, well, our rights are still going to be here. Like, if I'm part of the LGBTQ community, I'm going to get to keep my rights. If I'm a trans person, I'm going to keep my rights. If I'm a woman, I'm going to get to keep my rights. If I'm an Indigenous person, I'm going to get to keep my rights. Those are all super, super, super important to me. Whereas, like with the Conservatives, that just isn't there, right? So, in this election, yes, I am going to be supporting the Liberals. I hope that they win. But if I had to choose my favorite leader right now, it would be Jonathan. He's brilliant.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to run for the Green Party later on in life. Like if Canada doesn't go down the drain and we end up like, weathering this storm, I eventually want to run as a Green Party candidate myself.
I'd love to see you two connect together privately, because you could probably help her along with some of those conversations. And
I suppose,
she
yeah.
is amazing. She would be a gift to the Green Party.
Awesome, and I am pretty new to the party myself, so I guess I can offer some advice, but I'm really new. I only really joined the federal party, I think, January of this year. So
That's
I
okay.
have been impressed with.
That's okay.
I'm impressed with Jonathan. I'm impressed with the platform. I'm really noticing that there's lots of policy heads in the Green Party. You know what I mean? There are a lot of the people who are serious about policy and invested in policy. At the grassroots membership level. And so I find that encouraging, and I think the platform reflects that. And I do think it's funny, with respect to Charlie Angus, so I voted in that leadership election. He was a contestant, as well as a few other folks. I think it was like Charlie, Nathan Cullen, Nikki Ashton, Jagmeet Singh, and maybe one other candidate. And I ended up voting for Nikki Ashton first and Jagmeet second. And my reason for not voting for Charlie Angus is that I sort of felt like Charlie Angus can't be Charlie Angus and be a party leader. You know what I mean? He would have to strike a more conciliatory tone. I love Charlie being Charlie. I love him, being a gadfly and an iconoclast. And I feel like with the direction the party was going in anyway, it was a more of a big tent direction. I feel like he would have been at odds probably with the staff and administrative layer of the party. And I think it would be great to be at odds with them.
I was going to say 110%. Like you saw it happen, right? Like there was a lot of decisions that the NDP made that Charlie Angus sat on the side and went, I am not okay with this decision, and I am not going to be participating in, action based on this decision. So he's been very vocal about that, but that's why I would have loved to see him as the leader, because I would have loved to not see the NDP go down that road. But yeah, as you said, it was something that was already in motion at the time, so I understand exactly what you mean. But I would love to live in a world where people could appreciate a leader like that. But we are so far away from that world.
I think people are ready for it too. You know what I mean? I think and I'm gonna make a very strange connection here. Donald Trump. I think that one of the things that people find compelling about Donald Trump is that he is basically always off message. He is basically always just spitballing. You know what I mean? Like, I think people are really tired of the sort of over-prepared, rehearsed, talking points oriented way that politicians speak to the public. I think they're rightly resentful of, and with Trudeau, the more prepared he was, the worse he sounded, and the more disingenuous and irritating he sounded to people, I think.
He
and
really
so I think
enunciated, didn't he?
You can picture him rehearsing it in the bathroom mirror. Yeah. I find when he's delivering remarks now, but he didn't used to be like that. I didn't think earlier in his career he was a little more, because he's got a habit of he'll stammer a little bit sometimes when he's on the spot, but there was a lot of times when I thought Trudeau was pretty strong off the cuff, but the more moving forward on a go forward basis and the blah, 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 people are just tired of it, man. And so when someone comes it's to the point, and this is what I say to people, I think that there are some people who they're so sick of it that they'd rather be lied to earnestly than read the truth off an index card.
Yeah, I think politicking too, it was easy for Justin to kind of envision what it was like, but I think it's probably a whole other thing when you have to speak as prime minister of the country. You know what I mean? And deliver those messages. Because if he was just speaking off the hip like he was at a Gord Downie concert or any of the other places where he did it, it's really easy to be himself.
Yeah, and some of his better moments, I thought, were in those moments, those less prepared moments. And I think he's an effective, like he's reasonably literate. You know what I mean? Like his vocabulary is fine. He doesn't. I think that like Mark Carney is going to sound more statesman-like. I think that he's just a little bit more believable as a statesman, and I think that's kind of the vibe that people are getting. And you couple that with like, okay, you threw photo ops with the hockey stick, and like it already looks more authentic than any of Pierre Poilievre's like, greetings, fellow Canadians. I too enjoy your activities. You know, what are these silly trying to paint him as like a blue collar guy. I try to get him like pumped up and have him in t-shirts. It's just like, you know, nakedly transparent. But
me,
yeah,
Mark
I think
knows mega math.
What's that?
I said Mark knows mega math. So he was working with a few of those individuals well before he became the PM, right? So he knows kind of the potholes and the tricks and some of the things that they're going to play financially or have played, that he, you know, just getting out of the Brexit mess and all of those things, working with Harper and Flaherty, you know, he knows mega math. He knows the bullshit that he can expect, and he knows the graveyard of bullshit they've left behind. Frontline, what do you think?
Honestly, what was going through my head right now is how little conservative supporters actually understand of any of this. So, like, for example, when I think about the income tax cut, right, that Pierre is offering, right, that 2.25% doesn't actually take full into effect until like 2029. Now, they don't get that. And so even when their first year of income tax cut is only 0.5%, they're going to think that it's 2.25%, and they're never going to know any different because most of these people don't even look at their finances or understand their bank statements. Like, that's a problem, right? We have a huge problem with not being financially literate in this country. So it's very easy for people to not understand, like the carbon tax, right? There's a lot of people that are now like, oh, I'm not going to get this extra like $800 I was getting a year. And it's like, you didn't believe us when we told you were getting it, right? And it's because at the end of the day, they just see one number in their bank account and everything goes based off that. So like, I don't know. I'm having a hard time because I don't know how to like dumb it down more so that they will understand, because it feels like it's already quite simple. And I'm just scared that no matter what, whether it's, you know, if Pierre Poilievre gets in, I really hope that he doesn't, but let's say that he does, right? Let's look at that scenario for a second. When things get tougher, I'm afraid that they're going to have the same response as the megas are having in the States right now. Because they're all going, yeah, you know what? We should suffer right now for the betterment of the future generations, because they just literally don't get it. They eat up everything because it's cult mind. It is cult mentality. And so I'm scared that even if, you know, a lot of us that understand what's going on, we have this thing where deep down we're like, yeah, well, you know what? If they vote in the wrong guy, we're going to have that fuck around and find out phase, right? But they're not finding out. They just go to the next slide, to the next talking point. And so my biggest fear is that they're not going to understand. And then if Carney does do some really good things for our economy, the Conservatives are going to spin it in a negative light. And again, they're not going to actually understand.
Okay,
so
I have a question for both of you. Sorry. What do you think, like when we look at the history of Joe Biden and what he did in the United States, understanding that this election could be very similar? And
that's exactly what I was going to say.
Right? So my question to you is, what do you think? Sorry, I shouldn't have interrupted you, Frontline. I'm sorry about that. What do you think Carney can do differently than Joe Biden to move the needle?
See, that's the biggest problem. In all honesty, that is the biggest problem, is that these are problems that we're seeing like the end of, because these are problems that were started decades ago, right? We have had a culture that dumbs people down. And I'm sorry to say that. I know that sounds mean, but there's a lot of entertainment, a lot of TV shows, even the way that we're teaching in school, like the way that we're teaching math in school today is not the same way that we were teaching it 20 years ago. And it actually makes kids more susceptible to believe in propaganda when they get older because they are not taught how to critically think about things. And so one of the biggest reasons I want to get involved in politics and why I would like to in the future find a home in the Green Party is because my only goal in politics is not to become prime minister or anything, but it's to champion for reform for education, and using our tax money to pay for post-secondary education for people. Because when we have an educated society, we have a democratic society. And the biggest threat to democracy is not being educated and not being able to critically think. So that's what I'm still afraid of. Like, I am going to continue to be afraid, even if Carney wins. A lot of people think it'll be like, oh, if he wins, we won, it's over, it's great. No, it's going to continue. And we're going to have even more problems at the next election. And no matter all the good things that Carney might do, they're going to be spun in a negative light by these propaganda pushers that people just believe verbatim. That's exactly what happened with Biden. Biden did really good things for the economy. He actually, so far, like deported more people, even though that's not a good thing, but still, right? They wanted that. It's not a good thing, but still, they didn't understand those numbers, right? When Democrats were like, what are you talking about? We didn't have an open border policy. What are you talking about? The things that he did were good. And to them, again, I'm so like against deporting people, but that's a whole different story. We can get into that another day. But they didn't understand the numbers. They didn't understand the policies. And they didn't understand that, for example, it was the Republicans that blocked Biden from being able to do more. And then they got mad at Biden. And it's like, no, it was your guys. Your guys went against what you wanted just so that Trump could run on that talking point for the next election. And you all just eat it up. So I don't know what we're going to do, but I do know that somehow, some way, the answer still lies in education.
Education. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you hit it on the head when you talked about, it's not merely the last 10 years, but the last 40. And I sound like a broken record when I talk about this because it comes up so often, but, we've been hacking away at public services, at infrastructure, at healthcare, at education since the 80s, since the rise of trickle-down economics and the sort of like the unholy trinity of Brian Mulroney, Margaret Thatcher, and Ronald Reagan. So what we're seeing is the delayed onset of the collapse of some of the things that make our society work. And the only reason it didn't happen sooner is because we stopped having kids as frequently, basically. Like, we've been below replacement rates of fecundity since the 70s. And so it's only now that we got temporarily caught up in terms of how many workers are actually in the workforce by having, the massive amounts of immigration, that now these problems have come home to roost. Now we realize that that basically, like, if we have enough workers to propel the economy, we don't have anywhere to put them. We don't have emergency rooms open to take care of them when they get hurt. And so in terms of what can be done, people keep talking, conservatives keep talking about Carney's book, and they try to tell me that Mark Carney is a communist. And and I'm not a person who uses communist as a slur, to be clear. Mm-hmm. But I don't. It strikes me as unlikely that a central banker would be a communist. But that's, this is the thing. Like, we need to get back to some of the things that we used to do in Canada that made things work. For example, here in Nova Scotia, a previous conservative government sold off the power utility to an energy company, and now the investors in that enterprise have a legislated, guaranteed 8% rate of return on their investment, which is downloaded onto ratepayers, and Nova Scotia Power will ask for rate increases so that they can meet their obligations to investors. To me, like, we need to. I want to see. This is my pipe dream. This is my Hail Mary. I want to see a state grocer. I think we should have bought up all those Target stores that closed when Target went under, and set up sort of like a Petro-Canada, but no frills, basically. Because Petro-Canada was doomed for reasons because
nationalizing the food chain.
Well, like, and not like a nationalized monopoly. To be clear, like this is the thing because like we're told a lot about competition and the way competition works and the way it's supposed to keep prices low, but it doesn't work the way we're told it does with essential goods because like there's some things that you can just opt not to purchase. There are some things you don't have to buy from anyone. But when it comes to groceries, when it comes to a few other things that cell phones, like there's only a few people to choose from, and you have to pick one of them, and they know that when they put their prices up in unison, everybody wins. And so this is the thing: the prisoner's dilemma doesn't apply to groceries anymore because the flow of data is too easy. It's trivial for an operation the size of Metro or Sobeys or Loblaws to know what their competitors are charging at any given time and adjust their prices accordingly. So if you imagine you're the CEO of Loblaws and you see that Metro and Sobeys are selling eggs for $8 and you're selling them for $6, like what's your pricing response to that? You're going to put the eggs up to $7.50 to remain competitive. So this is the thing. Like we really need to like the competition that we say is important in our economy. The problem with competition is that competitions produce winners. But this is a competition no one must ever win. And so to keep that from happening, I think that a state grocer is like, I don't see anyone with a real material plan to bring food prices down and to hold the grocers to account. I don't see the legislative tools. Not at the federal level. I think that a lot of the attorneys general of the provinces really dropped the ball by not acting on anti-profiteering legislation that is on the books in the provinces. When all these prices went up during COVID, when all the grocers realized that they had us over a barrel and they could just put the prices up as high as they wanted to and leave them there. This is the thing. Those supply chain issues have been resolved, but the prices remain high. The prices didn't go back down because the market has demonstrated it will pay the higher cost on those goods, right? So yeah, I mean, we like the government, every government in the world is some kind of participant in its own economy. And all we ever get from all the way from Stalinist Russia to, libertarian Argentina is varying gradations on how involved is the government in the economy. And so the Canadian government needs to become a bigger player in its own economy. We need to make sure that we nationally own all our resources so that we can charge appropriate royalties for them. So that there's a future for Canadians, the same way there is in Norway, where they nationalized their resources and like they charged appropriate royalties on their oil, and now every Norwegian is set for life. They have a massive sovereign wealth fund in Norway that's funded by all those oil revenues. So we need to get back to a lot of like socialist values that this country has, even though it's scared to say the scary S word. Has held dear for a long time. Our medical system, like in bedraggled as it is right now, is one of the signature policies of Canadian politics, is one of the things we talk about when we differentiate ourselves from the Americans. And so like we need more of that. And that stuff is ostensibly in Mark Carney's book, from what I'm hearing from conservatives who are absolutely panicking. Like he's the second coming of Chairman Mao. But I think that that's what is needed.
Awesome. Thanks. I'd love to get some thoughts from everybody else. Just a quick note. We are on the Beaver Politics Network, or the Beaver Network. Thanks for joining us all tonight. We're talking a little bit about what we think the change is that's going to be needed. So if we got a Mark Carney government, what are some of the things we would like to see? Calvin, I see you. I gotcha. We want to talk about those changes so that we don't, some thoughts. This is like a think tank on TikTok. So not sliding back like a Joe Biden government. What are the things that Carney could do to strengthen this government? Chime in, Calvin.
Oh, wow.
Wait a minute. Sorry. Magic Mike, Calvin. I saw a video.
What Magic Mike?
I saw a video of you.
Where?
Dance.
I didn't do. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
All good.
You caught me off guard.
I embarrassed you. I think I see you blushing.
Yes. I saw everything that happened in the United States, and I knew everything that was going wrong and what needed to be changed, and nothing was done about it. And I'm glad we're talking about it here today, finally. So, if Mark Carney gets elected, there's a lot of things that need to change. How politicians and people in Parliament, how they communicate with the regular citizens has to shift. Enough of this bullshit politician being proper, being elusive, being dancing around the issues, not giving you a straight answer, that's gotta fucking go. It has to be straight and direct. People are sick and tired of politicians politicking. Be real. That is what people want. And this is both sides of the fence. You know, that's one thing people have to do. And you see that shift now with AOC and Bernie Sanders. Everywhere in the States, they're one of the most popular people in the States now.
Yeah, yeah.
Magic Mike. Next thing has to happen is we've got to stop. So another factor why this is happening in our country is because of our education system. Just like the United States, our education system is profit oriented. So we need to take back the education system and give it back to the people and not be profit oriented. Like, I know they have to make money, but we have to make a capitalistic system that is beneficial to the people. And there's models all over the world that a capitalistic system can succeed as long as it has checks and balances that is beneficial for the people. That's another thing that needs to happen. And then
Strong checks and balances, because they blew through those checks and balances really quickly in the US, Alberta, Ontario, Nova Scotia. Those checks and balances were just like, what?
Yeah, and the next thing,
Me too.
So we need to strengthen our education system. We need to take the model that Germany has. Germany, because they've gone through this before, their whole education system, right from K2 all the way through university, they have a mandatory course in every school grade that teaches about propaganda and misinformation. So that's why the biggest reason they were more resistant in Elon Musk taking over their elections is because of that very core basic principle.
I point out one thing though, real quick,
Yeah.
and this might be a little bit of a depressing thing to point out, but the CDU that's in power right now is still a right-wing government. They're just not as far right as the AFD, but they are still a member of the IDU.
Yeah, I know.
So unfortunately, even with all of that education that they had in spotting propaganda, they still had 30% of their population that voted for the AFD, and they still have a right-wing government in place right now that is under the IDU. So obviously the propaganda still worked. And I think we need a lot more than just one course in high school, because if you go back to your high school education right now and you try to remember what you learned in social studies, do you remember it? Probably not, right? And that's the thing. Most of us don't remember because, again, it's a culture issue too, right? Most kids in high school are not actually paying attention to their grades and their education. They're paying attention to popularity because that is what Hollywood taught us to pay attention to.
Just to interject, I remember more religion classes than actual social studies classes. And that was in Alberta and in Newfoundland, where it was just, we went to religious studies all the time, but we get an hour a week for social studies. How does that work?
So the next thing that needs to happen, and this all has to take place, or Pierre Poilievre isn't successful this time, he'll be successful next time. The next thing we have to have is we have to pass legislation that governs the internet and makes people accountable. Because the internet and social media is such a wild, wild west, it's a breeding ground for misinformation and things to be passed around as misinformation, as truths. So that, because they've been dragging their asses for so long on the internet because they don't want to upset the billionaires that control these systems, well, guess what? The billionaires tried to take over your own country. They're already taken over the United States. So I think it's about time you stepped up for the people. The next thing that needs to happen, provinces have to be held accountable. And the federal government has to make federal provinces responsible and explain it to the people. Because people don't know that the provinces are responsible for the things that they're mad about. The federal government needs to identify each province and call them out. Look, This is Nova Scotia. This is what Nova Scotia is doing. It shouldn't be doing it, but they have autonomy to do it. But this is bullshit. And they need to call out each provinces when they do that. There needs to be a call out of bullshit in real time.
Do you think that the premier should have as much power as they have? Or do you think a lot of those powers should kind of revert back federally? Just after everything we've seen.
No, I don't think it should go back to the federal government, because if we start doing that, then we're messing with the Constitution and we're centralizing power to the federal government. The way our democracy is structured, each province is independent, autonomous to the federal government. That ensures democracy and equal representation. If we strip provinces of that, then we're no better than the United States that's already centralized in power right now. But what we have to do, instead of stripping them of their power, we need to hold them to account and call them out on their bullshit.
Okay, I like that. I like that a lot. Anything else you want to add to that, Calvin?
Basically, politicians need to get off their asses. It's a new shift. It's a new time. No more pretty boys. No more shaking hands and kissing babies. Just stop the bullshit and call it out and be honest and be upfront. That's the new trend right now.
Love that. Jazzy, what are your thoughts?
Hi,
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thoughts, I guess. Calvin, you always speak so elegantly with such force. I love it. And I hate following you because my points never come across so strong. I guess I'm just gonna go back to my, and if I have to mute, it's because I'm gonna have someone barking here shortly. Back to, I have no idea how we missed the male 18 to 25 vote. It was screaming at us. It was screaming at us from the States. I'll fess up. I was more, I didn't see an election coming. I wasn't following Canadian politics as close as I should have. I was very invested in the US. I saw what was happening. I'm seeing even still what's happening. I don't know. You should look at it. I shared a Charlie Kirk video, a TikTok.
I think I saw that today.
Texas A&M, and it was basically someone said, and you're not going to call this a cult. And it was, I still can't believe it. Anyways, I digress. But I am not naive enough to think that has not started to completely. Oh, I'll be back. Just 1 second. Sorry, guys.
Okay.
Now, I know what she's talking about. All the political parties here, both in Canada and the United States, have been catering to their traditional voters. They forgot about the youth. They forgot about the students. And that's why historically, universities has always been continuously being made into a profit machine rather than an educational institution. So they've underestimated the youth, both political parties. And unfortunately, the Republicans in the United States recognize that there's a large voting bloc in young males from 18 to 30 that are not voted. And so they hired Charlie Kirk, Joe Rogan to cater to these individuals, to give them a false sense of masculinity, to redefine masculinity. So what these political parties on the opposite side have to do, they have to have their own influencers to start to teach the youth what proper masculinity is, what healthy masculinity is. And they have to target that voting group from 18 to 30 and start catering to them, because this is a direct result of years and years and years of all political parties ignoring the youth. This is why the youth have always felt so disenfranchised with the elections.
I just for a little bit of context about me, I taught in Alberta for many years. I started teaching in 1997. So for 25 years, I was teaching there. And one of my most interesting experiences looking back now is watching the rise of the mama bear. And the mama bear would show up to school and she would say, "You're not teaching my child right. You're not doing this right. I don't like them. I'm pulling them and I'm bringing them to charter school." Those boys, that mid-age that we're talking about, those young men, those are a lot of those men that charter schools were used to politicize those young men and make them angry through religion and all kinds of other things. And I think that's where we kind of failed. Like, we allowed this system to go unchecked for a long time through charter schools, through home schools, and people will say that they were checked up on. No, they weren't checked up on. You know, the parents signed up for their kid to go to school so they could get a free computer, and then they sent the kids to church all the time and to Bible camp and to all of these things, and they've made a little rage monster. And I
Sorry, go
saw
ahead.
it all across Alberta, and it's something I struggle with all the time. It's like one of my Italian neighbors across the street, she always says to me, "Miss Radical, they weren't born that way." And they weren't. They have been politicalized, and that's where I feel like we see that big gap of angry young men checking in.
Absolutely, Calvin and our host, you both really identified, the crisis of masculinity in young people as a synergy with the political ambitions of conservatives, and the way that it's created an opportunity for fascist ideology to rise. You know what I mean? For people to be looking backwards in the same way that, like, people, we talked about Germany briefly, in the same way that their country in the post World War I era experienced a sort of like economic humiliation and a humiliation of their country. Like, they're wheeling around, wheelbarrows full of Deutschmarks because their currencies become worthless in what was previously and would subsequently be an economic powerhouse. So, like, yeah, there's that sort of cycle of, like, there's this gap that's opened up where, like, the male role model space is being dominated by some of the absolute worst people. And the thing about it too is that it's self-perpetuating, because, like, in the same way that, like, the medical industry in the United States, and to a lesser extent in Canada, sort of like, there's this idea that a cured patient is lost revenue. That if you actually cure the patient, then it's more lucrative to just treat them for years. And so I feel like these manosphere influencers are peddling specifically bad ideas that don't even do what they say on the box. They're trying to teach these young men how to dominate women and sort of like dominate society, and they're giving them nakedly bad advice with women. And so they're experiencing more of that frustration and more of that rage. And because ultimately these people are grifters. And they have businesses to run, and there's all kinds of money to be made doing this sort of thing. And Charlie Kirk and Joe Rogan are certainly both examples of that. But it also relates both to, Calvin, your point about post-secondary education, and as part of a larger symptom of the way that young people have absolutely been abandoned in our society, not just by the political parties, but by government, and by, like, there's just the idea now that you can go and just get a good, honest job and make a living and provide for yourself is an absolute fantasy for young people. It's just not viable, and there's a lot of legitimate anger on tap there. And a lot of young men that don't know where to put that anger, and they've had like one or two or three slogans repeated at them for about 10 years about the carbon tax and the carbon tax. The conservatives were crying about the carbon tax before their government fell. They were already talking about it. They would reply to every liberal question in question period with, the carbon tax, you know what I mean? So there's all kinds of repetition going on, all kinds of, like, and those big tech companies that you talk about have been utterly complicit in the way that, like, you go on YouTube and it'll show young men this stuff. It tries to show me this stuff, and I hate this stuff. And, like, it's like, Joe Rogan, and like, man, get out of here with that. Like, you know what I mean? So it's just being pushed on them, and they've, young people in general have been abandoned, and part of that abandonment, like Calvin has identified, is that the way that we've just radically driven up the cost of post-secondary education.
Exactly.
And made it, and, like, that's on purpose. That's something that conservatives wanted in the States. They wanted people to be debt slaves. because debt slaves have fewer options in life. I was so fortunate that like my mom was the assistant to the president of the university I attended, so my tuition was free. So I left university with no student debt, and I was able to pursue a 10-year career in music that I know I would not have had if I'd had student debt. So this is the thing. Like, there's so many people just like their futures have just been stolen from them, and no one appears to be listening to them. And so someone who's going to offer them community and strength and dignity and power is going to have a great deal of power over those young men.
And that's
Exactly.
where,
And
go
this is
ahead,
why
Karen.
and this is why after this election, if Mark Carney is successful, you're going to see a big shift from focusing on elderly and your normal voting base to more of a youth oriented uh, 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 campaign, and to cater to them, because these people have been forgotten for so long. They're frustrated, and exactly what you were saying, that Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson, they're grifters. That's all they're doing. They're just sucking the money out of out of these kids. And as unfortunate as it is, they need somebody to come in and call these guys fakes. Like, they really are.
Yeah.
They're genuinely fake. There is not a masculine thing about Jordan Peterson. Like, honestly, have you ever seen him talk? Crossing his
He's
legs
terrible.
and
He's
crossing his legs and talking so feminine. Like, I'm not. There's nothing wrong with talking feminine, but I'm just saying, I don't understand why men are seeing this guy as masculine when he's probably the biggest coward I've ever seen. When you take masculinity and you identify small marginalized groups and you attack them, I'm sorry, from a guy, that's cowardly. When you bully somebody just to exert some kind of dominance, that is fake masculinity. That is bullshit, and somebody needs to call out Jordan Peterson. I'd
and
love to go on one with Jordan Peterson and tell him off.
Jordan Peterson is offended by the Trans Canada Highway. That brings fear to him. It's a problem that anybody would look up to somebody who is concerned over the Trans Canada Highway. And it sounds like I'm making a joke, and I wish I was, but he actually did a whole speech on how offensive it was about the Trans Canada Highway and how they needed to change the name of it. And I'm embarrassed that that's a true story, but it's out there, it's researchable, it's there for everybody to see and
See,
observe.
He's
that demonstrates how much of a coward and a little baby is. If a name
100%.
insults you, then you're not a man. A man doesn't let anything bother him.
You're so right.
What's
But
up?
I wanted to touch just a little bit on your part about school in Germany, because I think you're really onto something there with young people and people that are angry and tapping into that education system. I have a good friend who grew up in Germany, and she was, how she explained the education system to me there is, like you go in and you're kind of rooted into a system when they figure out if your mind is mathematic, if it's social, if it's musical, and you're rooted through the system. But by the time you graduate in grade 12, you've got your degree. You're not paying for, thousands and thousands of dollars for student debt. That would be a big part of people not being so angry.
Yeah. I'm I'm getting angry just talking about Jordan Peterson.
I maintain that most of the people who support Pierre Poilievre would have stuffed him in a locker in high school.
Yep. Yeah,
Oh,
and this is the thing that I came up with. We have guys, because they have not attained true masculinity. They're now trying to redefine what masculinity is, because it's not attainable to them, and because it's not attainable to them, they're using power and influence and procedure to try to change masculinity so it suits them, so it
Welcome.
benefits them.
hello, welcome.
Hi, it's
Hi.
it's a good topic to be on because this isn't going to end like next week, right? Because we're going to have the Stop the Steal signs exported in large numbers to the north.
Yeah.
We're going to see Alberta 51st. We're going to hear, about how critically important pipelines are from people who don't know any math and can't do calculations to figure out that they're actually not the right answer to anything. And there's no way to answer that other than to just basically crush the maple MAGA. We'll probably get a convoy every 2 weeks.
So I'm just going to respond to this question. The guy said that I'm mad at Jordan Peterson because he's successful. No, dude, we're all successful in our own lives. I'm happy Jordan Peterson is successful in his own way. But what I'm pissed off is I was bullied as a kid every single day, and it pisses me off when other people take advantage of another human being. This is what it means to be human, to have empathy towards another human being. So I'm pissed off because he's taking advantage of people that are their minds are still developing.
You know, Peterson to me, I mean, I'm old, right? I'm 60. And I personally knew some of the intellectuals in Toronto who kind of achieved a bit of world notoriety, like Jane Jacobs, and I worked with some people who worked with Marshall McLuhan, and there is a kind of a quasi legitimacy. Northrop Frye, the scholar of the Bible, inspired McLuhan a lot. And Peterson sort of is from that camp of people. Like there is actually a real intellectual core of people that talk about some of the things he does. But the danger is that you take that and you're in this lane as a clinical psychologist, which kind of means you know how to manipulate people. Like that's the job of a clinical psychologist, is manipulate people. And to me, Peterson is remarkably similar to the H man, like really, really similar. If you listen to an actual speech by the H man translated into English, its tone is remarkably calm and rational until you get onto one of his trigger points. And he was clearly capable of negotiating deals. He was clearly capable of operating as a diplomat. He got like 20 deals with the West before World War II breakout. So Peterson has the same ability to sort of sit on a stage, on a panel, be in an interview, and appear completely rational. But then when he's off on a solo rant, right, that's when you hear it. That's when you hear this direction of hatred. And it's profound and it's specific and it's terrifying, really. The way he would go after, like, the evil doctors who cut off the chest of, of an actor, who he's already abused enough, so I'm not going to name him. And
Oh,
and basically just this kind of highly directed solo ranting. And then when you get him sitting, he can sit on a stage with somebody like Stephen Fry and be a perfectly rational seeming debate partner. So it's really, really hard to portray him as a ranting maniac. And he has also got this powerful moderating influence. His daughter is really quite brilliant as a media manipulator. She's the brains behind his merch and his media presence and all that. And she's constantly moderating him and making him look like, oh, dad, when he goes too far, she can pull him back in, like, he's not to be taken seriously in this moment, right? And then in that moment he is. So he has got this operating mode around him that makes him, I think, more dangerous than any other of these intellectual figures.
you're absolutely 100% right because he's trained in that field. See, narcissism, especially covert narcissism, is a relatively new field of science. So, social science. So they've been able to take that model and plug it in to a national campaign like Pierre Poilievre. But you see it in Jordan Peterson. Just like any narcissistic abuser, they hook you, they talk to you. This is his time on the stage where he's really grasping the crowd intellectually. And without even you knowing it, boom, you start at the end of it, then you're hit with hate. Then boom, back to normal intellectual again. Then boom, hate. Then back to intellectual again. So you start to get addicted to the cycle. I know the game. I've seen the game. I'm a recovered abuse survivor. And it took me years to get deprogrammed. So now I can pick out these patterns in the general public or everyday interactions now.
And he is really good, he has a way of with his voice, and it sounds very wise, and he can talk, and he can throw a real good word salad out that people have to think about for a little while, but it always ends up absolutely offensive.
That's a really
Only
interesting assertion about like he's more dangerous than the other ones. Like he's more dangerous than Rogan or like Charlie Kirk.
I totally agree
Or
with him.
that's it. I don't. I'm on the fence about it because like I think there's a way in which Jordan Peterson is part of the legitimization of this kind of thinking, and he gives it that veneer in the same way that Ben Shapiro does it to a
Dr.
lesser extent.
Jordan Peterson. Yeah.
Yeah, like it gives it an air of legitimacy. You know what I mean? Or appears to some people. In terms of his reach, I think that's where I'm like, does because Rogan has a much broader reach as I understand it, and so like to me, like he is the origin point of a greater quantity of brainworms, but
Yes.
the Jordan Peterson brainworms have like a little tuxedo. They're like the meme of like the regular Pooh Bear and like the smug Pooh Bear with the in the tuxedo. It's like that kind of brainworm. So it's like it's more like fancy looking and it is convincing to people who might not be convinced by somebody like Joe
But
Rogan.
he is in America now, so the reach of the College of the Physicians, the rules that are involved around Canadian social media, and all of those pieces are, he's away from that now. So he is probably going to feel empowered to be even more obnoxious than he already was. That's just my thinking.
All true,
Apparently
but
as well,
like,
he's the new Don Cherry as well.
Oh, John. Oh, this.
what worries me though is that,
Territorial, like in terms of his clothing, like it's just like it's just like so outlandish. Like I don't know. Anyway,
yeah, the Don Cherry jackets are interesting, but again, part of a psyop, part of a reach down to a working class bit of iconography and to another loudmouth character from Canada. I think he's more dangerous in the U.S. Arguably, if anybody watched the Republican National Convention last year, it was actually masterfully stage managed. And the equivalent to Michaela Peterson in the US is Laura Trump, who was a media person before she married Eric. And she managed that RNC convention, and my jaw was on the floor with how well that was managed. They brought up people of different ethnicities and backgrounds who had previously voted for Biden, got them to explain sincerely in their own words. They had a model with a shaved head and a bunch of tats being cheered on by a whole crowd of MAGA types. Like if they wanted to completely dispel the image that they were a white supremacy movement, and you watched just that one night with those ordinary people, you would have been convinced. It really was effective at portraying this mass movement centrist notion. And also there was, interestingly enough, was interesting what they didn't respond to. There were some lunatic Christian Zionists that got up and issued some fanatical pro-genocidal nonsense. That got no response from the crowd. And they played into the stuff that worked, and they didn't play into the stuff that didn't work. And this is very careful, good media manipulation. I felt like I was watching, this is like a Nuremberg rally level intelligence at figuring out what the crowd will respond to, giving it to them. And then when they say, "Oh, you're doing this," or "You're one of these people," you bring up just an example of a person supports you that just doesn't fit the stereotype. They just kept smashing all of the Democrats' messages about them very successfully. So if
Yeah.
you put a Jordan Peterson into the middle of that and then replay that RNC convention, they could very well be equally successful in 2028 and make a pitch
100%.
that is wildly effective at something like 51st state appeal. Like that's the danger, is that you've now put an expert in Canada into the American camp.
I was gonna say something. Oh God. So I I saw the convention, and you're absolutely right. The way they staged it, it was beautiful. Um, it was beautifully done. See, what's happening is because of the old style politics, both in the United States, Democrats, and here in Canada with the Liberals. We have those vanguards, old veteran politicians that are sticking to the way politics has always been done. But guess what? Politics has shifted. They need the Democrats need to get rid of Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer is just taking up space, and they've got to get rid of Nancy. They've got to get rid of all those old proper. Even
You read
Hakeem
my
Jeffries.
mind.
Hakeem Jeffries is a good speaker, but he's still part of the big boy club that
Correct.
governs how old fashioned way things are done. They need to unleash AOC, Jasmine Kraken, people that will hit you where it hurts.
Yeah.
And when Jasmine Kraken or AOC is debating all these gaslighters, they will stop them in their tracks and call them out. Because all of these other politicians are so proper, they won't do that. But they need to stop doing what politics has always been done. It's a new shift. It's a new time. It's a new political atmosphere. They got to get with the times.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm so ready for it. I don't want to see another politician in a suit. You know what I mean? I don't want to see the typical kind of speech that they gave my grandparents and my parents before that. I want it to get spicy. I want them to be strong. We need that.
Thing
And
about
we
the
need it in the
Democrats,
strongest way possible.
the Democrats though are sadly they've learned nothing. In fact, they may have learned the worst possible lesson, which is that they could get away with not having a real primary in 2012 and then again in 2016 and then again in 2020 and then again in 2024 and just rigging, and they still have their members, they still have the donations, they still have a lot of state governments, they still control California. So I think they're basically giving they got the wrong message. Like I tell you when my awakening moment was, and it was the uh-oh, like when I realized that things were really not going to get better in the United States. It was in the first Trump regime. The first figure to kind of rise to prominence was Buttigieg. And he got out there and he started just saying, we've just got to beat Donald Trump. And that was when my heart sunk right down to the floor. It's like, oh my God, they have set the lowest conceivable bar. They don't have to be better at anything at all. They just have to not be him. So they can run a candidate as bad as Trump that is slightly less offensive and win. It is the maximum least worst goal, right? The worst possible person you can run who can most corporate, most corrupt, most worthless, that can still just barely beat Donald Trump. That's the standard now. And of course, they
And
ended up with
to an
Biden, who was exactly that.
to an extent, that's the standard we're holding the liberals to now. I mean,
Yeah,
like,
true.
they just
True.
have to be better than someone who is loathsome. And that's the way that, like, their society and ours are both shuffling to the right a little bit because we keep making these concessions to the right, and because there is no meaningful left alternative almost in Canada right now.
Canadians were very lucky that Carney stepped up to be the slightly less loathsome and not like Freeland. So like it could have been worse. And
Yeah,
we could have been going down like literally a character straight out of a CIA vat who wants World War III to happen and destroyed the entire world economic system by bullying Germany into kicking Russia out of SWIFT. Which, by the way, the consequence of that is the Chinese rolled out their renminbi-based system like this week. There's already $1.2 trillion in transactions on it. It clears in 7 to 10 seconds. The United States dollar is no longer the reserve currency, and whatever power the West had through its economies to control the world value system is totally gone.
I missed that, but I didn't not portend China like taking advantage of the situation for sure, and I think it's should be one of our trading partners. But I did not hear about the shift in the reserve currency. Holy mackerel, that's huge.
Well, the concept of reserve currency is a bit technical, but here's the issue: during the SWIFT system, it takes 3 or 4 days to actually clear a transaction. So if someone paid you in something, you have to wait 3 or 4 days. You want to be paid in something that isn't volatile over those 3 or 4 days, right?
Yeah,
That's why there is such a concept as reserve currency at all. But if the thing clears in 7 to 10 seconds, who cares? I
yeah.
could pay you in dump trucks of scrap copper. I could pay you in Pokemon cards. Well, it's not going to vary very much over 7 to 10 seconds in the clearing
I,
time. So you
I
don't
want to.
actually need to hold a reserve of anything because there isn't any suspended value. And so the idea of a reserve currency is basically gone now.
I wanted to touch up on that point, and I want to go back to Mark Carney for a second. Mark Carney is good at zero bullshit. Did you hear his speech on his rebuttal of the conservative costed plan? He called out that shit, but he needed to do that in the debate. he didn't do that. And I'm sorry he didn't do that. I wish he would have done that. I would have felt a lot better going into this weekend for Monday. The SWIFT system, the United States has total loss all economic. I've said it back in November when Donald Trump came in. We are watching in real time all the economic benefits that the United States had as being the superpower in the world is now gone. And that the new paying system with China and BRICS and all that. What do you call that? BRICS or no? BRICS was the British.
Curious Leaf is just saying that he didn't have a costed plan yet.
Huh?
So I'm thinking by the
it's not.
debate.
It's the conservatives. It's not a costed plan. It's a costed dream. It's not. That's not a costed plan at all. But Carney at least called out the bullshit of the plan. It is not a plan. You can't run a country without a plan. And unfortunately, a lot of conservatives because they're so indoctrinated, they won't see that. All they're going to see is pretty pictures and small words, and they'll think it's
Calvin, he's taking woke out of the government. He's taking woke out of the Canadian government.
Somebody I saw somebody's TikTok or on the news today or somewhere online when I was doing some research. They actually, the French version and the English version, they took out the woke section of the costed plan. So I guess he's losing supports from actual woke people that actually are aware of situations. I guess I don't know.
If you look at the revenue side of what the cons actually publish, it's kind of astonishing because there's 20 billion in tariff revenue. Like he's just going to go do exactly what Trump did. And then there's a $70 billion from a lawsuit against Big Pharma for like vax injury or something. Like this is how he's going to get $90 billion. Like this is childish crayon scrolling. It's not a plan.
I heard some generous presumptions had been made about revenue in their plan, but I didn't realize the extent. That's wild.
They're absolutely insane.
Crazy. He's doing all these numbers, but I know exactly what, because I read the plan. The plan is the way it's structured. He's assuming that the tariff war is going to last forever, but it's not really like that. It's really okay. He's going to build jails. Who's going to build those jails? It's not going to cost Canada anything because rich American billionaires are going to do it. They're going to develop all the businesses. He's basically opening the corridor for the United States to come over and take over big businesses here in Canada, such as medical, dental, through prison systems. Basically, he's handing over the entire country and its profits to the United States. And he's expecting jobs to be produced from that. And those jobs he can collect taxes from. So he's basically spending $0. He's making all the taxes from that. But we essentially we'll be an extension of the United States and we'll lose our sovereignty because of it.
Well, PP and Kevin O'Leary are kind of competing to offer worse deals than 51st State. Like O'Leary's Economic Union, like you lose your passport and can get deported to El Salvador then, and you lose your currency and any ability of monetary policy, but you don't get a vote in the U.S. Congress or Senate or presidency. Like that's worse than 51st State, and that's what O'Leary's actual office is. No, it's even worse. Puerto Rico does get to actually vote as, for the president. But you'd have no vote in an economic union situation without standing. So that's literally what O'Leary says the plan is. And there's other people on TikTok talking about that. And then PP's plan is, I guess, even more vulnerable to American pressure than that. So this is just crazy nonsense from an economic or sovereignty point of view. And I
just want to take a minute to jump in and let everybody know they're watching the Beaver Network, and we really appreciate you all. And thanks for joining us tonight. We are Truth Through Discourse with Frontline Feminist and myself. I have another question to ask. I wanted to say thank you to Curious Leaf just subscribed to us, so that's awesome. Thanks for joining the Dam. We look forward to awesome conversation with you. My next question is, if the Carney government moves forward, what do you think? Like, we know that people are going to be hot. We know that people are going to be angry. What are our plans for combating that right now? Just going out in today's day-to-day society. What's that going to look like? Because we're going to have a lot, like they're going to be hotter. They're going to be angrier. We watched that get gemmed up with Joe Biden's term.
To be honest, I'm freaking angry myself. I'm super angry. The entire time that, we were talking about Jordan Peterson, as a woman, we keep basically walking around the issue. This guy is a full misogynist. The Republicans, the conservatives, this whole right-wing movement is a war against women. It's a war against minorities. And I'm so sick and tired of us not calling it out as it is. This is freaking 1930s Germany happening all over again. And we're trying to just be nice about it.
So how do you see us calling it out? What do you see us
I don't know. I don't know if this is going to be able to be solved without some sort of a war. I don't. I don't know if we're going to be able to just hold hands and find peace again, because these people are unhinged. I don't know if you guys saw the quite viral video that went around about what happened to a woman that was traveling from Toronto to Vancouver, and she was assaulted in Vancouver on the seawall in Cole Harbour. Right? So if you go to that woman's comment section, it is fucking disgusting. People are literally saying, you brought this on yourself because you voted for Liberals.
Yeah.
They don't even, first of all, they don't even know who the hell she voted for. But they don't even care, okay? We are dealing with people that are going to become excessively violent, specifically towards women. And we keep on just trying to go, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? I don't know what we're going to do, but it seems like when we do try to do something, we have double standards in our society. That's what needs to freaking stop. We have double standards. Conservatives get away with pretty much anything. And when we try to defend ourselves in any way or call them out, we're the bad guys.
Yep.
The other viral video that you guys probably saw at a Mark Carney rally, you had a conservative woman. She was shoving her phone in everybody's face, trying to get everybody all riled up. And she put her hands on a woman that was in the lineup for the Mark Carney rally, a liberal woman, obviously. She put her hands on her first, and they got into a full-blown altercation where they ended up fighting each other. And then the police was there, and the police basically did nothing. And everyone was like, she started it. We have it on video. This woman started it, and they basically just gave her a warning.
Yeah.
How is that normal? I am sick and tired of a society where that is normal. People keep, asking why don't women go to the police when they're assaulted? That's freaking why. Yeah. That is why. The Toronto police came out, for the love of God, the Toronto police came out in their social media and endorsed Pierre Poilievre and said that the Conservatives are the only party that actually care about public safety. Why are we letting this shit happen? The police should not be partisan. I'm so sick and tired. At the end of the day, I think that us progressives need to get nice and strong so that we can stand up to this, because we are going to be fighting Yahtzees again. And I'm sick and tired of us trying to pretend that it's not going to happen and pretend like everything's going to be okay. But this movement has gone on for way too long. And it's not going to stop anytime soon. And it's only going to get worse. And if we try to regulate it, like Calvin said earlier, when we try to regulate it, they're just going to get more angry. They're going to get more violent. And at the end of the day, if you read Project 2025, if you read the Butterfly Revolution, if you read these fucking, not even just that, but if you look at what the president in El Salvador is doing, because Trump and him are actually very aligned. And there's a playbook that they're following there too. If you look at all these playbooks, we are weeks, if not months away from Trump having a full-blown citizen army that he built, his army of brown shirts. That is why he pardoned 1,600 January 6th insurrectionists. Those guys will be the generals of this brown shirt army. And I'm sick and tired of us taking this shit that we hear online from these people saying, oh, the liberals are the Yahtzees. No, I'm sick and tired of the projection. I am so done with us trying to play nice all the time. Like,
Exactly.
we have to call it out for what it is. We are fighting fascism. It's on our doorstep. It's here. It's not tomorrow. It's right now.
I've been telling a lot of politicians,
Franklin.
take off the gloves. Take off the gloves. You got to stop this shit about being nice and take off the gloves. And the reason why Donald Trump got back in is because the entire court system in the United States failed. Because, like she said, it's a two-tier system. Some people, they get royally screwed over, and then some people get away with it. If Mike Carney comes in, remember way back in the day, people were scared to be racist. We need to make them scared again.
I
to
agree.
Be
We
racist.
need to become like we need to become gremlins. We need to become ninjas. You know what I mean? In a way, and I'm not talking about hurting anybody, but I'm talking about accountabilities and getting out there and getting within the system, just like Gremlins did. Get in the system. and
We need to expose them. We need to expose them. And this is why I've said this a bunch of times. But whatever government we have or whoever it is that has the money to pay people to do this, but we need to start a misinformation and disinformation task force where people are basically going online to figure out what's going on, what they're planning, sitting in those disgusting Telegram chats to see what's being talked about so that we can bring it to the surface. Because the problem we have is that there is a giant part of our population that is just waking up now to this crap that's been going on online. And it's been going on online since 2014, 2015. This is not new. And there's very few of us that actually pay attention. Like, how many people do you know that actually have the patience to watch a Joe Rogan interview? Not a lot. And yet there's parts of that interview that everybody should be seeing, right? Like when we talk about Jordan Peterson, there's a lot of people that haven't seen all of the clips online. Like, I've done a deep dive on him and I've pulled so much shit that he has said. Like, he literally sat there on a podcast and said that he doesn't think he's upset that he can't deal with women the same way that he can deal with men, because when men do something against him, he can just physically hurt them, but he can't do that with women. And then he's like, you women, you need to get your crazy sisters under control because we are not legally allowed to do anything about it. So again, when you extrapolate that, what is he saying? He wishes that he could beat the opposite sex. Schmecks, whatever, right? Like, that is what he is saying. These are, if you look at what Andrew Tate puts out on the internet about women, it is disgusting. It is absolutely vile. And this is the stuff that needs to be exposed, because I do believe that the majority of our population is not hurtful, is not violent. They just don't know. They don't know because they don't have the time to scour online and find out what's really going on. So we need somebody, we need a team of people that can bring this stuff to the surface. And I know a lot of us content creators do that, but that needs to be more exposed. Like, more people need exposure to what's really happening so they realize the dangers of it. For years and years, I have been warning people, and for years and years, people said that I'm crazy and that I'm over exaggerating and, oh, it can't happen here, it can't happen here. And now everything that I warned about is coming to fruition, and people are finally coming to me and going, oh my God, you were right all those years. I wish I listened to you. But if we had that exposure in all those years, maybe we wouldn't have gotten to where we are today.
You're right. And I gotta tell you, during this election, I have people all over my town calling me. And it's, Beaver, what do you think about this? Miss Radical, what do you think about this? I remember that time we had this talk. What do you think about this? So I'm putting time aside for those conversations. Let's go for a walk. Can you bring a friend? Let's have a conversation about what you're thinking, how you're feeling, where you're going. I think we have to have a lot of conversations, but I love your idea about going in and listening in and holding accountability, because I think maybe as a group we could maybe come up with some kind of system around that. I agree. I love it.
And we need to get women to wake up, because there are way too many women out there that are supporting politicians that go against who they are as a person. Like, you are voting in for parties that look at you as subhuman and you are rooting for them. That is a massive problem. Women need to wake up in the masses and realize the system that they've been under for years and years and years, and realize that we've only had a better system for only the last 50 to 80 years, and that these politicians want to bring us back into the dark ages. Like, at the end of the day, half the population is women. And these parties and fascism is a direct attack on half the population. And that needs to be front and center everywhere.
It looks a bit like the way the Italians organized fascism in the 20s and 30s. Like it was a very soft, slow start.
Exactly.
It started
Exactly.
culturally, right? And they used mechanisms like fashion and traditional gender roles and glamour and music and art. Like they really attacked along a cultural vector, Mussolini's people. And if you look at good documentaries of the time, you'll find that it was all fairly evident in the way they dealt with in their media. And like their media was always upfront about the goals, and they raised a generation of people that believed in the revival of the Roman Empire, essentially. And they didn't actually need all that much, like they were colonial in Africa and so on, but they didn't rely on racism or hate nearly as much as the Germans did. They were able to do it with essentially just a kind of cultural shaping. And Italy was a fairly new country. It had been through all this about 50 years earlier. And at that time, the country was largely held together by like Verdi's operas as the national message. So there wasn't really a sense of a militarist message there, but they reached into the past. And the whole idea in fascism, you sell people on rebuilding a mythical past in which you were a great people. That's the whole principle. It has no future, it has no present. So they always sell you on an image from the past. They use Roman legionary images. The Germans use crusader images and so on. And all of this is about we were great at one point in the past. The key is the Make America Great Again. The key word is the again, that we did this before and we can do it again, right? So it is always evoking some past thing. And that ties it in neatly to religion. It ties it in neatly to sentiment. It ties it in neatly. Older people kind of think, oh yeah, I remember that from when I was a kid. They don't, but and this is all a very common pattern. I agree with Frontline that if you actually look at their doctrine documents like Curtis Yarvin, or you read any of what Peter Thiel writes, you essentially see this as the plan to build a kind of oligarchy technocracy. If you look at the 1940 technocracy map, it includes Panama, it includes Greenland, it includes Venezuela. Like this is the literal plan that Elon's grandfather was behind. You look at the map they used, and it really just looks like a reboot of that 1940 philosophy of, quasi meritocracy based upon money and whoever has, I guess, the most clean and patriarchal ideology that they can sell to the maximum number of young men who will fight for it. And that is literally fascism. And it's tied neatly to these international movements. Like, Zionism is a form of fascism too. It's very evident in Israel that you have profound Jewish supremacists in charge. And obviously, that very much splits the Jewish community. But you can see that in America, only about half of Americans support Israel now, and you have very prominent Jews saying, "Hey, stop it! Not in my name. This is crazy. This has nothing to do with me and nothing to do with my religion." But it's out of control, right? And there are people who were behind the right wing 10 years ago that are saying it's out of control. Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens stand up and say, "Hey, wait a minute. We're not going to war with Iran over this." And what the hell? Like literally, there are people even on the right trying to put brakes on something that they helped to create, but they keep getting more momentum. I'm amazed when I look at YouTube how many new channels there are that appear to be astroturfed pro-conservative channels. There is an absolute attack happening. And if you look at an interview like the one Rachel Blevins just did with Brian Berletic, who lives in Thailand and is a geopolitical analyst, he says that Thailand is under constant attack by pro-US forces that just use exactly these methods to insidiously impart pro-US, the most pro-US party gets constant support from these apparently grassroots but really astroturf channels, and that it has pulled Thailand into a position where it could become even a proxy state used against China, which would be horrific, right? It would be like Ukraine or something. You could get wrecked. And and that's the danger, is you become potentially either a puppet or a vassal or a proxy. They don't have allies. They're a protection racket. It was just an interview that Dmitry Laskaris did with somebody who explicitly describes how the American system is a protection racket. They aren't seeking peace in the Mideast. They aren't seeking peace in Europe. They're seeking to aggravate those threats to the level that everyone has to run to them for weapons, has to run to them for assurance, has to run to them for mediation. A literal protection racket for the planet. And my own attitude is there's only one response to this, and that is to systematically break up the United States. It's the new USSR. Get California to secede, get Hawaii to secede, get Guam to secede, get New England to secede, end it. Have them form a new capital if they want to. We don't have to take any of them as provinces, but it's them or us. They've made this very direct threat on our sovereignty. We'll have that permanent asterisk on any dealings with us or any investment in us. Will consistently have that friction, which will destroy our economy unless we deal them the death blow. So I think America ends, and it ends at our hand, and that's the only way
Or it
we
ends at
retain
its own
sovereignty.
hand. I mean, if it follows the arc of so many other empires, it's just about come due, basically, for it to collapse. And when you're talking about things like a shift in the reserve currency, and the reordering of the global economic system that we're
Yeah,
seeing, I
it has
you
to
know,
nominally end at its own hand, but with everybody intelligent blaming us.
yeah. And in terms of talking about the rise of fascism, here in like I live in Dartmouth in Nova Scotia, and here pretty recently there's been an appearance of a Patriot Front esque masked active club in Dartmouth, fronted by Jeremy Mackenzie, who you might recognize as the person behind
Yeah.
Diagolon and the person who was arrested for being outside of Dr. Strang's home, in addition to other criminal charges elsewhere in Nova Scotia and in Saskatchewan. And so they staged some kind of photo op in front of the Cenotaph at Sullivan's Pond, which is a park in Dartmouth, about a month and a half ago. And then there was the following weekend, there was a rally that I was involved with. I'm a protest audio technician, so I've done about 65 events in the last 18 months. And so I brought my rig down in the rain, and we had about 300 people, including the Liberal candidate, because this is during the election, of course. The Conservative candidate was there, apparently, probably 3 or 4 New Democrats, and of course 2 Green candidates. And so it was interesting to see that. And Jeremy came to the event and started a whole thing, and the cops came, and there was a bunch of nonsense. And so fast forward a few weeks, and I'm accompanying my Green Party candidate to some candidate forums. And some people affiliated to, like, Morgan, Jeremy Mackenzie's partner, for example, shows up, and 2 of her affiliates are there in the back of the room at a forum in Eastern Passage. And myself and my candidate kind of said the long goodbye. We didn't leave until everyone else had gone. But apparently, Darren Fisher, the Liberal candidate, was harassed on the way out of the forum, to the extent that when we did another event the next week, just last night, there were 2 cops present, a security person from Elections Canada. And again, 2 of them appeared again. Morgan and one other person were there in the back of the room. Very chummy with the PPC candidate, by the way. And so, yeah, so we're starting to see, and so this organization he's starting is called the Second Sons, and it's I'm not inclined to believe that the acronym is a coincidence. And it is also branded as a quote unquote active club, which is the way that incipient fascist groups in the United States and increasingly in Canada are trying to legitimize their hatred and organize basically little fight clubs and train in martial arts, and in the States train with pew-pews. And here, I mean, like, it's illegal to do that here. You can't do military style training with pew-pews in Canada. I don't know that that's a way of knowing that isn't happening with this group.
Oh, it's happening in Canada.
Yeah,
It's happening
so
actually in the South Shore too. I have friends. I'm on the South Shore, and I have friends in Bridgewater who have been approached in bars by people trying to sell them white supremacy stuff. A partner bought something off of Facebook, and she bought it from a guy who went to get it in his shed, and he had a bunch of weird gear up on his walls, and he had the literal swastika tats. Like, these people exist, and they are not hiding anymore the way they used to.
We went by a pew pew show in our town, and there were 3 rows of young gentlemen in formation, and there was a man yelling things, and to me, from a distance, it looked like they were going in to prepare to buy pew pews. It really made me nervous.
it's
This
alarming.
is sorry.
Well, it is alarming when you see communities like, for instance, fishermen who already have access to firearms and know how to use them, and have sometimes been successfully agitated into incidents like what happened in the fishery a few years ago. These are people that are, fundamentally potentially recruiting bases for these kinds of active things. So I'm much, much more concerned about that kind of group, like a group in a profession or a trade that has access to the ocean, right? Could smuggle things, and has some degree of facility with some of the tools of, actual fighting, and who can engage in clandestine operations, like, and land things and move people. Essentially, prohibition was smuggling industry was built on people just like that here on the South Shore. So I take that very seriously, and I try to stay in touch with people who are lobster fishers and so on, and just sort of see what the feeling is. And I think the feeling among the older people is very sober, somber, intelligent. Like, basically, they want to end tariffs with China so they can swap lobsters for BYD cars. And, you can't repurpose a fishing boat or a harvester the way you can repurpose a factory. So Ontario should just build robots and admit they lost the car race. Like, rational, sensible things like that. But if we have stupid leadership in Ottawa, which tries to preserve the ICE auto industry or tries to engage in foolish confrontations with China of the type that we did under Trudeau, then we could see massive economic unrest in Saskatchewan and in Nova Scotia, and then I would see the recruiting skyrocket. So I'm one of those people who strongly favors everyone but the U.S. approach in trade, and I would hope that we rationally kind of draw a ring around the sane world. I hear a lot of people just saying, "What, like older neighbors in their 50s and 60s, why don't we just join BRICS?" I mean, it's not that simple, but that's what they're saying. And like, they really just want to completely abandon dealing with the US. And so I get the feeling that where we are at right now is a time a lot like September of 1939, where you saw actual Shimotsy rallies at Madison Square Garden being held in the open by activists. You had people in the US government who had just engaged in a business plot in 1935, I think, tried to overthrow, or 33, tried to overthrow FDR. Smedley Butler foils it and writes War is a Racket. But they are there, and they want to ally with Germany. And, Canada takes the plunge and declares war on Germany. But for over 2 years, we don't know what side the U.S. will take. And this is a time like 1939. We don't know what side the U.S. will take, if it stays one country or
For sure.
what.
Frontline, you wanted to chime in there?
I was just going to say, like, this is, again, proof of what I was saying earlier, is that we are going to have to fight fascism in our lifetimes. And this is a 110% repeat of 1930s Germany, except now Germany is the United States. And I think that when we look at the worst case scenario, it's going to be civil war and probably a lot of violent unrest all over the world, because unfortunately the difference between 1930s Germany and today is social media and technology, which lets these ideologies now spread globally versus being in one country only. So I think worst case scenario is, going to be full-blown wars and the good guys fight the bad guys all over again, but kind of more of a global thing rather than just in the United States. And then the best case scenario is that it gets so bad in the United States that a lot of people in other parts of the world are going to wake up and realize what's going on and go, we don't want that here. And then the governments in those places will take direct action against those people. Because look at all of the conservatives, like the extreme conservatives, guys like Jeremy, that are walking free. Yeah. Like that's kind of the point here. Like they do horrible things and they get to walk for free, right? Like you look at Joe's friend who was at a pro-Palestinian protest, and now she was arrested and she's spending 6 months in jail for having a squeak toy at a protest because that was making too much noise, and apparently the noise was aggressive. But then you have the convoyers that occupied a city for 3 weeks, and all of them are walking free, right? Like, ooh, they had their bank accounts frozen for a little bit. Oh, sure, Pat King went to jail for a little bit. Cool. But now he's out. He's spreading propaganda again. He's doing what he always did, and nothing's changing. Like, these people are not being held to account. There's double standards. And until a government actually does something about it and trains the military against fascism within its own country, I think we're going to see the worst case scenario versus the best case scenario. Obviously, I'm still having hope for the best case scenario, but the best case scenario is still going to require a lot of unaliving and suffering for us to see in the United States, for us to be able to wake up, right? Because that's how the world woke up when they finally figured out what was actually happening in Germany, right? But in the beginning, like, they were doing horrible stuff for a long time before other people caught on and went, wait a minute, this isn't good, right? It took time. So again, are we going to go down the same path where we kind of figure it out and then the rest of the world gets their shit together because they see the actual consequences of that ideology? Or does it catch up to us even faster before we see all that stuff happen? Because I know that, like, for us that are here in this live, we're seeing it and we're terrified. But there's a lot of people that aren't paying attention to it. They don't understand what's going on. And I've seen comments, for example, about Kilmar Abrego, where people are like, oh, well, that's just one guy. Like, it's just going to happen, you know? How can he get rid of all of these illegals? There's obviously going to be some other people caught in the mix. We can't give everybody due process. That's going to take too long. Like, it's just what has to happen, right? Because it's not in front of their face yet. It's not affecting them yet. It is not something that they're seeing on a massive scale yet. So I don't know how slow the descent into full-blown fascism is going to take. Right now, we're at the beginning stages of it. But if it takes too long, then in other countries that have this mega movement already going, we might end up having to kind of battle it out ourselves. Or, hopefully we'll wake up and see what's really happening down there. But no matter what, it's not good. Like, we're not looking forward to this beautiful future that I used to daydream of when I was a little girl. Like, that's just gone. Yeah, right? I'm in a state where I'm constantly, like, preparing for war. And what I wanted to say is, this is from 3 years ago, so around the kind of convoy time. I grew up in a city that was very conservative. A lot of my friends were very conservative, but at least back in the day, we used to just disagree, right? We used to be able to just kind of disagree and kind of move on. But I'll never forget when I had two of my friends that I went to high school with that ended up getting married, and they moved off into an even more conservative town. And they were telling me on how they're stockpiling their weapons for a, like, government takeover, and they were stockpiling hunting rifles and a bunch of other stuff that I'm not going to say out loud, but they were stockpiling hundreds of weapons to get ready, right? So everything that Hublai said, at the end of the day, it's happening. These people are going to be better equipped. They're going to have more weapons. They're going to be better trained, because none of us progressives, most of us at least, I know some progressives like to go out to the range and whatever, but most of us are not violent people. We're not trained in the martial arts. We're not trained in self-defense. We're not trained in, hunting, weapons, whatever. We're not prepared for them. And they pose a giant threat. Like, who were those two guys in Alberta that they caught a couple of years ago that were hoarding, like, tons and tons of weapons and ammo in their shed? They were all over the news. And they got away with, like, a slap on the wrist, basically. They did, 6 months and then they were out. And these are the type of people that are leading these extremist groups. And that's scary. So I think we have to mentally, physically prepare. And one of the things that I want to go back to, because I got to get off the live soon here, but from the very beginning when you said, like, what can we do moving forward after this election? And Calvin gave some really good options of what the government should do. But I also want to be realistic and think that the government's probably not going to. I think that the government is way too scared to start regulating the internet after it's been deregulated for so long, because it's going to cause a massive, uprise of people that are going to go, well, why are you deciding who gets to say free speech? And it's going to be messy. Like, we didn't regulate it when we should have regulated it. And if we try to regulate it now, it's going to look super bad and it's going to cause too much of an uprising. So I don't think that any politicians are willing to do that right now. Maybe in small things like not letting mature content be viewed in schools, or like no cell phone in schools type thing, maybe something like that. But I don't think they're going to go to the level that they actually need to go to. Again, it's a sticky situation there. So then we as the people, right, we can't let the government do everything, but we as the people have to become more politically involved. I think that's the only answer here. We need to go to local town halls. We need to meet with our politicians. We need to write emails. We need to call. We need to run for local positions in government. Like, we need to get involved. We have to do something. We cannot leave it to them. They won't do shit. And at the end of the day, they work for us. They work for us. People need to be reminded of the fact that politicians are paid for by our tax dollars. We are paying them to do a job for us, so we need to hold them accountable. We need to constantly be bothering them about what we want to see, right? Because so many people are not politically involved, and that's why so many of these politicians get away with so much, because they're not being held accountable by the people, because the people don't know what's happening. They're not involved in local politics. Most people don't even know the difference between provincial and federal governments and what their responsibilities are. So until we can get the people, right, educated and on board and active in their own communities, we are not going to see changes.
And activist school boards, it's library councils, it's all of those little things. It's just not big government, okay? This is all of the little wheels and the cogs, right, that keep that system going. And if we all get involved, we can start creating some kind of change.
Just like how your vote isn't just a right, it's a responsibility. It's every single one of them. We can't expect the government to solve this problem for us. It's all up to us. And this is exactly what we're doing now today. When we see fascism, when we see somebody out in public that's misbehaving and acting like an idiot, you call it out. And but I think Mark Carney does recognize the very threat and predicts that we're going to have to fight eventually. And that's why he's securing that over the horizon radar, the Griffins, and meeting the GDP for us for NATO with our defense spending. This has been the plan from all along. You've always had fascists, but they've always been hidden, but they've been organizing throughout this time. And we haven't seen them because they've been doing all of the planning behind the scenes. And so they always quote Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman, with the architect of how to take over countries through economic capitalism. They've got to realize, and I don't think they have this ideology of Milton Friedman, but everything he has done, Milton Friedman, and destroying countries and making them to authoritarian governments, it doesn't last. Throughout history, people have to realize that the only successful authoritarian government has been China. Why? Because historically, China has always been an empire. That's how they evolved. Every other country in the free world did not evolve that way. That's why their system works better that way. And in their system, they've always protected their system from American influence. And what we're seeing in the States, what Russia is doing, what the United States is trying to do to us, this is what the United States foreign policy has done to other countries in the world to take over their economies. So basically, the United States, their foreign policy is being used on themselves by Trump, on its own people.
Boomerang.
Exactly. And that's all.
Well, guys, I have to jump off the live here because I have another meeting that starts in 4 minutes, but I just wanted to say thank you, everybody. Sorry that I got a little bit heated tonight, but I'm feeling extra spicy these days with all the rhetoric that I see online and with all the projection. I think the projection is the thing that bothers me the most, because at least be true to who you actually are. Like, just say it out loud with your chest. I am a fascist and I support fascists, because I'm sick and tired of all the projection. So that's all I'm going to say there. But please, everybody that's listening, get more involved. Figure out how you can get involved. Figure out how you can get to know your MP. Go participate in your local town halls and your local meetups. Just do something. Like, just do something, even if it's just posting something political on your, Facebook or Instagram or whatever it is. I know I don't have Meta anymore, but I know a lot of you do. And that is, Meta is completely being taken over as a conservative dumpster fire. So if you are still the voice of reason, please speak up, because I know a lot of people are scared, right? That's what they did well. That's what the conservatives did really well, is they made people scared. They made people scared of speaking up for truth and justice and equality. They really did, because as soon as you do speak up about those things, especially as a woman or a minority, you get attacked like crazy. And a lot of people cannot mentally deal with that. So I do think that it's time for us to just go, you know what, enough is enough. I'm going to put my tough hat on and I'm just going to stand up for what I believe is right. And it's going to take sacrifice from people. It really is. You have to be able to sacrifice some things in order to fight fascism, right? That's why the heroes of our time were the heroes, because they sacrificed themselves. And people need to stand up, stop being scared, and go out there and make a difference in whatever way they can, even if it's, as I said, a tiny little stupid meme, whatever it may be. Right? The Chinese are doing good with their memes. They're doing great stuff with their memes, right? They understand that a lot of people understand things through small little cartoons. Maybe we need to do that too. But whatever it is that you can do, please do it. So thanks again. Have a wonderful night, everybody. And I will see you soon.
Thanks, Frontline. We love a spicy Frontline, so that's okay.
Thanks, Frontline. Keep it spicy.
I don't know why. I always love listening to her. And it's like whatever she's saying, I'm thinking. Like
She's really good at putting it full circle. We talk every couple days, and I feel like she's reading my mind as we're talking. I'm like, I was just going to say that. She's great. We're lucky to have her on our team.
Yeah.
Final thoughts. We're heading into 8. Let's give each other a few minutes to have some final thoughts about what comes next. I love what she talks about and how we carry ourselves, how we face it. What's next? Who wants to go first?
Honestly, I am tired. I am tired of fighting. I need a weekend or two. But I'll be back. I'm a fighter. I'll be back on the horse in no time, fighting some other battle. But every single one of us out here, every single one that's looking at this live, you have to become a fighter, because no one's going to fight the battles for you now, especially in this critical time. Every single one of us have to step up if we want some kind of decency to remain. And that's pretty much all from me.
I love that. Thanks. Who's next?
I mean, I've been trying to, for the last 7 years, trying to get really involved in politics specifically, and at least try to learn about it. And I feel like I've had some success in at least learning how it works and learning what the problems might be, and trying to wield some influence, like a little bit, like just even locally. And so many of the important battles happen locally. You know what I mean? You mentioned school boards and library boards. Those are actually definitely places people can get involved. I think a lot of people, there's a way that our personal lives have shrunk as a result of the way that productivity in our society has continued to ascend, but real wages have remained static. So more and more of our time every day is required for work. People are working 2 and 3 jobs. And so that is depriving people of time to spend with their families, which is being downloaded on teachers. I think in the public school system, the public schools are asked to do more and more with less and less. The parents have less and less time to provide guidance and support for their kids, and so the kids just kind of get left behind, and leaves the parents and teachers pointing fingers at each other when they're both being robbed, I think, in so many ways, just by the rapaciousness of capitalism and the way that so much time is being taken out of our lives. But one of the other things that deprives us of the time for is organizing and getting involved in community and volunteering and things like that. And so I've been toying with the idea of joining my local search and rescue
Nice.
outfit. So those are volunteer driven. It's kind of like volunteer firefighting almost. There's training, but you're going to provide your own gear, and like it, and you're going to be out in the weather. So in the course of working on these rallies, I've been doing sound for mostly for Palestine, but also for some labor issues and for some indigenous issues as well. I've been some of those happen rain or shine, and I'm out in some pretty crazy conditions, and I've been slowly over time gearing up, getting a good like rain get up together that does happen to be bright orange because that's what SAR uses, and because it has ways that it bookends with potentially having to be a marshal, which is something that like there's times that I might be called on to do that. So there's a reason I picked orange, or a few reasons I picked orange. But yeah, that's something I've been toying with. Again, like leaving the NDP and getting involved in the Greens is part of like, okay, well, I feel like I have to remain involved. I've left the party that I entered politics with.
Right.
I feel like I have to keep doing things. And so I've been like working with my local Green candidate who is close to a lot of the issues that I am. And I've been working to try and improve her profile and like put her signs up and book her volunteers and help her with debate prep. And so I'm really trying to do a lot of these things, and there's ways for everyone to fit in. Like some of the jobs that really need doing are so mundane. You know what I mean? Like I feel lucky that I get to do that. I have my sound equipment that I bring out and I put it on my truck and then do all this stuff. But like there's so much, and I find that a lot of it is borne by women. I feel like I've walked into events where. Like I remember walking into, it was like a silent auction for missing and unalived Indigenous women. And I remember walking into the room and it's buzzing with activity, and there's people setting tables up, and there's people like, there's food and there's everything. And I'm the only, and there's like 30 people in the room, and I'm the only dude. And I think that I'd love to see the fellas, put some of this pent up energy that we have towards volunteering in our communities and trying to get involved in a material way, because I find it really satisfying. I find it's almost therapeutic in a way. Like I worry about these things like you all do, and so I try to put that worry into action and try to do something that I think is going to have some kind of small part of helping. But there's all kinds of ways to get involved. There's all kinds of ways, but people are so strapped for time. You know what I mean? Like there's people just don't have, like I'm fortunate that I have my work schedule is pretty civilized. And it gives me a little bit of extra time. And I do make some sacrifices too, in terms of my personal life, but from the time that I spend on these things. But yeah, I think that like, yeah, like Frontline said, and like Calvin said, and like I think we've all said in our way, yeah, we need to start getting material involved in our communities to prepare not just for the FASH, but for the climate crisis and the natural disasters that will undoubtedly result. That's one of the reasons I'm interested in SAR, is that like search and rescue volunteers don't just find lost people in the woods; they do disaster relief stuff too. So that is something that's intriguing to me. And yeah, pretty much every area has a ground search and rescue unit that you can volunteer for. So I'll just make the pitch for that one more time. But yeah, there's finding ways to get involved, finding the time to spend involved is where I've been focusing for a while, and I think it's what we need to do.
I love it. Thanks.
Before we go to the last one, I just want you to think about this idea. Just watching the chats there. What is to stop us from organizing into an official organization that goes from coast to coast to combat misinformation? Even if Carney wins, we're still going to have to do a lot of this work. So we've already organizing online on these chats. So what's to stop us from organizing and actually forming an organization that is specifically designed to combat this throughout Canada?
This is a
great time to mention antihate.ca is doing a lot of this work already and could use help and donations. And a lot of the work they've done is quite valuable in like identifying and taking some personal risks too, and identifying some folks involved in fascist activity. So yeah, antihate.ca. They do some really, really important work, and they are a national organization, and I encourage people to support them.
So I wanted to share a little bit about how the Beaver Network was created and why it was created to start having these very conversations that we're having right now. What's next? What do we do to change things up? How can we start having open communication with each other and coming together and creating community? I'm one of the original creators, and I was so frustrated with our voices being muted, being overlooked, being, I just needed to, I was starving for like-minded people to come together and start having these conversations. And now it's about creating those communities and building on them. And Calvin, you're absolutely right. We can build on this and make it
I
stronger.
think we should.
Go ahead, my friend.
Well, I just want to say that we have people on this continent who have been through this repeatedly over and over again. And if the settler colonial structures do not hold, then their structures will. There will be Wabanaki, there will be Cree, there will be Haudenosaunee. When all the dust settles, there will be Lakota, there will be Hopi. They will all still be there. And I would encourage everybody to learn where you really live, learn the language that describes the place where you really live, cease to identify yourself exclusively with settler colonial structures because they may all go away at once. My own theory is that the same way we saw the USSR, Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, and apartheid South Africa all disappear between 1990 and 92, my dominant scenario is to see the USA, the UK, Ukraine, and apartheid Israel all gone within 2 years. And if they are, in fact, have to be utterly reorganized, we lucked out in that there was not a tremendous amount of lingering violence after those changes in 1990 to 92. We may not be so lucky watching these other, shall we say, misformed powers or countries that, for whatever reason, can't come together to a peaceful identity that gets along with their neighbors. If they all go, we're in a position like Poland was in 1990. And if the USSR had come to Poland and said, you've got to join us now to save us, and we had said, no, we're going to go ally with the West, right? That's what Poland literally did do. And so we need our Pope, right? Like they had the Polish Pope to help them. We need our ability to not be seen as the aggressor to the collapsing power, but actually to enable the collapsing power to truly collapse in a way that doesn't actively cause an immediate war. And if it turns out that our own polity is disrupted or broken or whatever, we have recourse to the indigenous polities. And if you pick up something like the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples from 1993, you'll see it's all acknowledged there how to more properly construct an alternative form. And you could also see American states deciding they want the powers of provinces to make their own Canada-like federations that are more decentralized. You could see some of them asking to join us. You could see some of them secede. The toolbook to help them has to be moving more in a bioregional, more in an indigenous direction. It can't move more towards the centralization of power or the creation of European empires type things. So there is actually historians who study this, Audra Simpson, Pam Palmater, and others. They write about the Eighth Fire, the Oshtami Kazag, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And, understand what they're saying about this because it is all immediately relevant. And it's not heading the way that these fascistic sort of backwards forces want it to. And when they realize that it's not, they will get very aggressive. But if we want a successful model, why don't we just look at Mexico? Like 30 years ago, Mexico was fighting a low-key civil war in Chiapas, and Subcomandante Marcos was writing children's books, right? And when Subcomandante Marcos was being interviewed in Mexico City, he brought his comandantes, who were the older indigenous women that the Mexican media had ignored roundly for decades, and made them listen to them, right? Today, like Mexico never really accelerated into that level because of things like what they did, the Zapatistas and the Chiapas movement and Marcos and these people. So these are our real inspirations. And I would suggest that rather than just try to, correct, fact check adults, Why don't we write children's books saying what's really going on? Why don't we do exactly what Subcomandante Marcos and his commandantes did? That's the bottom of the North American Free Trade Agreement. We technically have free trade with these people. We should be able to copy their techniques from the north down. And some of the indigenous peoples, like in Nunavut, have tremendous autonomy, and tremendous autonomy down in the south of Mexico. So and they have a sympathetic government now in Mexico, which is really a profound ally of ours. Like, we're not alone if this continent goes to hell. I mean, we can just flatly pick up and declare ourselves Zapatistas of the North if we want to. And all the real old Zapatista professors in Mexico City, they consider Scheinbaum to be a Trojan horse who might talk neoliberal talk, but if you actually read what she's writing to her base, it is this. It is this. It is the renewal of Zapata's revolution. It is the inclusion of the indigenous peoples in it to a degree they were never included in it before. And it is pure awareness that if California splits or Aztlan forms or Texas leaves, that those entities will become good neighbors to Mexico, and the settler colonial garbage originating from Washington, D.C. with its slavers declaration and that living Declaration of Independence called Donald Trump, because he literally embodies everything in that vile document, is in fact, a dying thing at 250 years old. So we might have to look forward 25 years to see that. And one thing I really hope is that after this election, there will be leadership fallouts in our parties. Jagmeet will probably go, not really for fault of his own, but simply for being stale dated. Elizabeth May will probably go, again, not because she isn't a good constituent MP, but because she's kind of also stale dated. And I'm hoping we see someone like Dimitri Lascaris rise in the Greens, because, I mean, that's the person who's much more geopolitically aware and can help write that 25-year positioning plan. And then we can ruthlessly bully the other parties with the threat of vote splitting and with basically disruptive actions so that they simply lose elections until they agree with us, which is how we implemented the 2004 Green Platform. We just ruthlessly vote split the Liberals until they did everything in it. And they didn't deliver everything in it, but they promised everything in it. Like, they didn't do electoral reform or get rid of the Indian Act, but they promised to. So we got them that far. Maybe we can get them further. I have no particular great faith in Mark Carney, but he's a good checkers player. And somebody's thrown some chess pieces on the board, and maybe he'll figure out how to win the checkers game with the chess pieces. But in the end of the game, China and probably India and a few others are playing more technological Go. Like, they're preparing for a world where robots are doing most of the work, where hacking ability is your military ability, where warfare is seen strictly as a biological matter. Sadly, I think that is the entire future of warfare. And so when we look at things like defense policy and whatever, we've got to be cognizant of the fact that the US is the most biologically vulnerable power. Look how they behaved in the pandemic. They'll be destroyed that way. And if we want to not be, then we have to think like indigenous people who always retreated to the north, had resilient enclave communities, minimized their contact with others, built their society around being able to operate with less energy, less input, less material off the land. And so when we think about defense policy, we should not be thinking about things like spider jets from Sweden. We should be thinking about things like enclave communities that can last 2-3 years without any supply or support from the outside. And if we think of our 25-year picture in our party's policy that way, and we prep ourselves for the worst in the United States, we will find that like-minded people across that border say, maybe this border should be a little further south, or maybe you can ally and emulate with us, and we can create toolkits, and we can create units, and we can create trainers, and we can create propaganda that not just ruthlessly undoes, but totally subverts their entire culture down to including their religion and their whiteness, so that these things are not learned at all by their own children. And we just erase Abrahamism and race whiteness at the root, which is, I think, what Subcomandante Marcos's message is. So this is my plan for the next 25 years. And when the Greens look at their leadership, they're the best party to think this way, simply because they already have the bioregional base. They have the international organization. They have the indigenous allyship. They have the overtly feminist power statement. And they even refer to their originally referred to their principles as the five pillars, which is an Islamic formulation. So if you're looking for like essentially a kind of secular ecological, jihadi movement, the Greens were formed to be that. And I think Houthis are better than Hegsethis, and we can do something even more ruthlessly and effective and ecologically rooted and peaceful and feminist than even the Kurds did in their enclaves in Syria. So if we think like them and we think like the Zapatistas, we will win this, but we have to not set our goals to be too small.
To build off your point, when this all started, when I started noticing the patterns in other countries and then the US and then Canada, I screamed to the top of my lungs to all my community leaders here in my community. I told them, please, you guys are leaders, prepare our people. When shit hits the fan, we have to go back to the old ways, utilize people that still know how to trap and hunt and can food and prepare preserve food, because you have a responsibility as a leader to your people to prepare for what's coming. And if it doesn't come, great, but you have a responsibility. But they didn't effing listen, and that sickened me because my children live in this community, and because they didn't listen and they didn't act on it, I'm getting involved. I'm not running for any particular position, but the reason why I'm getting involved and I'm trying to get those old farts out is because their inability to act and be proactive to protect our people. I want young people in there, young people that have foresight to prepare and have a responsibility over their people instead of trying to come in election after election and rigging the system to their own advantage and their own selves. They're not thinking about future generations. They're only thinking about themselves and getting reelected and withholding power. That's why I am so focused on getting them out and replacing them with people that actually care and care about the future of my people, because they hold a lot of sway. If they told my people to start getting ready, start practicing, start learning how to trap again, they would. But they refuse to listen. They refuse to do this. And this is what set me over the edge. And this is why I'm so politically active. I haven't been politically active in my community in such a long time, but they left me no choice, because you're messing with my children's future and their freedom.
Calvin, you would make an amazing leader.
Thank you.
Seconded.
So this is why I've prepared my own children. I've told them, kids, when shit hits the fan, you already know how to hunt, you already know how to trap. We don't know how to field dress a moose or deer, but we will learn. But everything that we need to be self-sufficient, we can do. Okay, so I'm a father that did that for his children. Imagine all the fathers and all the people that's under their care. They are being negligent in their friggin' responsibility as chief and counsel, and that is something I am sick to hell of. Yes, it was okay for them to behave the way they were behaving. I was happy to let bygones be bygones all these years because there was not a world crisis, but enough is enough. You're neglecting your responsibility to your people, to me, and to my children and future generations. And I've always said that if shit hits the fan, and I've told this to the leaders, it's us First Nations that are still going to be left standing, and how we're going to do that is going back into the woods.
I love the image of your kids were affected and you were like, time to go back to the old me. Like, let's go. It's funny in Nova Scotia in the previous provincial election, or just ahead of it, the Nova Scotia government rolled out a really ill-advised program called the Nova Scotia Guard that was intended to be something analogous, actually, Hublai Khan, to the National Defense Force that the Green Party platform included, where they were going to take people who were being transitioned out of the oil industry and put them towards like a national disaster relief organization. So they tried to do something analogous to that here with the Nova Scotia Guard, but there was so much overlap with, again, I'll be thumping the whole ground search and rescue thing. Like it was so duplicative that it was obviously very badly received by those folks who have been having to do like bingo in order to fund the crazy fleet of vehicles. Like the Halifax ground SAR is like the real life Thunderbirds. Like they have like the crazy vehicles and the like rescue. They have this crazy truck called Rescue One that does all kinds of crazy stuff, and it has like a little vehicle in the back. It's like I would have bought toys of this stuff as a kid, but like it had occurred to me that as an alternative to that very very misconceived idea about the Nova Scotia Guard, and knowing that in Mi'kmaq here, like in Nova Scotia, part of a quirk I would say of the Treaty of Peace and Friendship is that the Mi'kmaq and the other signatories to the treaty agreed to rescue shipwrecked sailors as part of the treaty. And so I was like, well, instead of this nonsense about a guard, what if we really reinvested in our search and rescue units and also had some kind of organizational way to couple that with traditional indigenous land knowledge about like, so where there's a way to fund the training and the continuance of those land oriented traditions in a way that dovetails with that aspect of the treaty, and yeah, provides like like revenue and leadership opportunities for people in First Nations communities, and a way to again like to protect that knowledge and to make sure that it gets passed on and reinforced.
It's a great model because you're independent of the formal Commonwealth structure insofar as you're referring directly to the treaty for your legitimacy, meaning that it's recognized right away by Mi'kmaq Wabanaki people. In the East, where we are in an unceded situation, we actually have tremendous flexibility. If things were to go worse here than in the U.S., there's the Watertown Treaty between the Mi'kmaq and the United States, which is still honored for truck houses and trade. So, like, there's a number of references that you can use. During the New Brunswick fracking fight, which was far more ruthless and sophisticated than people realize in general, we used a lot of treaty reference terms just in our own organizing of Acadians and English settlers and Indigenous people and activists. And, it had a lot of great effects, including Kevin Arsenault becoming the Kent County Green MLA until the most recent wave election. So we actually built up real political representation in Kent County by just showing up and saying, hi, we're Greens, and here's our tool book of how to organize things. And, a lot of skills were involved, including some tactical ones, like, there's a bunch of very funny stories about this happening. It almost sounds hilarious, but when you put it all together, it amounts to a kind of a tactical handbook for disrupting fracking and making them pack up and go away, which they eventually did with minimal confrontation. I mean, it was, when I say minimal, I mean nobody died. I mean, somebody got shot in the leg, I think. But so if you can scare away $250 million worth of fracking investment with a bunch of trolls, cooperating effectively that way and leave yourself with a Green Party MLA in place, then you probably are pretty sophisticated at organizing. And if we had set that goal when dealing with Houston's silly uranium and fracking plans, it's an opportunity to organize. What you're saying about search and rescue is, I tell people to learn to sail. If nothing else, it feels wonderful to know that if SHTF where you are, you can sail somewhere where the problem isn't. And in our archipelago here in the East, just the tactical ability to be able to sail around quietly, silently, without fuel is very important. People that I know crew up to Greenland regularly on cruisers, and they're in a sovereignty fight too. We need solidarity with them as well. So we need to think about the Arctic and the North Atlantic, and even places you wouldn't normally think about, like Svalbard, which is technically administered by Norway and Russia together, but any human being can go there and live there with no visas or anything, which is maybe that's really useful to be able to sail up there from here. Like, there's a number of refuge strategies and a number of sort of just, activist in place strategies. And if the more you can align them into like your volunteer fire department, your search and rescue, and those are the active people on our side, the people who are genuinely concerned with protecting their community. The warrior societies, the volunteer fire departments, the people that go looking for bodies when the fisherman disappears, right? These are the real people who are going to really be there if we get into real operational trouble. And it's community building as well, right? Like, it doesn't have to be all about being scared about being invaded from outside, because there are 1,000 good reasons to walk the land where you live and pick up the trash and keep an eye on the, the wild species, and, plant some native plants that need to be there, and, take some records for science. And like it, you can have a long list of things that you do as you walk about. But I agree completely with Calvin that in the end you should have the eye and the ear open to the idea of where could you retreat to if you had to, where can we actually site a village that would have access to, clean water and be left alone for months potentially. Um, if we have to reorganize the larger, like, global and federal scale of things, is there a way to have a stable village level type of organizing that isn't negatively affected? Do you know 150 people that you would trust, to hide you within a day's, bicycle ride? It's a little harder in the city than in the country, but this is what resilience is made of. It's made of those kinds of ties. It's not made of legal agreements or contracts. It's made of the stuff Calvin's talking about, and the formal councils and the reserves and so on. They're set up as part of the Indian Act. Those people are technically answerable to the government, but the traditional structures are not under their control. The traditional confederacies are not under their control. And, if they want to set up their own education departments, we can provide resources and be subordinate to those in the things that we do as settler allies. So overall, I'm, everybody's got a bit of piece of the puzzle. I'm not sure how often we'll be able to have live meetings to talk about these things. It would be nice to have one once in a while, but hopefully we'll devote ourselves to feeding each other and maybe teaching each other how to forage or something, or how to tie knots.
With that, I guess I have to say good night.
We're all done.
So,
I was just going to let everybody know that it's a good time to end things. And thank you, Calvin, for being there. Con, how do I say your first name again?
you guys have been saying it right.
Have I been?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Have a good night. Thank you for being here. Thank
Thank
you
you,
for
guys.
being here, my friend.
Peace and
Appreciate
solidarity.
you.
Peace, solidarity.
Peace and solidarity, folks. It's good to see you all.
Have a good evening. Take care from the Beaver Network. Thanks for joining us.